Fred Richani of the Sports Courier TSC News. We have right here via Zoom a very special guest, a frequent guest. He survived 2020. Thankfully, somehow we survived 2020, and now we are looking ahead at the year of 2021 because, of course, baseball's to be played, but there's also a Hall of Fame class to be decided. And who better to have on than author, journalist, James Griffin, Jim Griffin, fellow New York boy. How's it going, man? How'd you survive 2020?
It's going well, Fred. All I can say about 2020 is that I survived, and I'll leave it at that. But no, I'm happy, healthy. I can't complain too much. I'm just looking forward to being able to do stuff again. Hopefully we all get vaccinated. Hopefully we're all safe and sound come summertime, and I'm looking forward to that. So.
Yeah, for sure, man. I'm really glad to see you still intact and everything. And when you reached out about the Hall of Fame, I said, hell yeah, one of the most wonderful times of the year for you, except, unless, of course, they snub some people that you think should be in, which we'll get to. So let's not waste any time. We'll talk about the 2020 season in a second and how that all went down. But we got the 2021 class. Right now, a lot of people think that pitching legend Curt Schilling could be a slam dunk. Do you think he's a slam dunk for the Hall of Fame?
Well, let's put it this way. He is a legend for reasons that he probably doesn't want to be at this point. But let's just talk about his actual Hall of Fame case just on the playing field. And when you look at Curt Schilling, the pitcher, sure, he's a Hall of Famer. He, won over 200 games in an era where wins don't mean probably as much as they used to because pitchers have less starts, but he still won a ton of games. When it comes to blending power and control as a pitcher, there's very few pitchers that did it as well as Curt Schilling. He got it done in the regular season, Cy Young Award winner. He got it done in the playoffs. I'm a Yankee fan. It hurts me to say that, but he got it done in the playoffs. So when it comes to his actual on-the-field resume, sure, he's a Hall of Famer. But then let's talk about the other stuff with Curt Schilling. So,
where to start?
So let's talk about his words. He uses words in an interesting way. Let's say he can best be described as a belligerent, I guess, is the best way to put him. There's really no way to be less blunt than it about that. But when it comes to his words, I can take that with a grain of salt. There's plenty of guys in the Hall of Fame who say terrible things, and that's okay. Let's talk about his actions. His actions, he raises money for charities, for ALS. That's good. I'll give that to him. What else does he do? He's an avid collector of Nazi memorabilia. That's not as good. He loves that stuff. That doesn't make him a good guy. And let's go back a few years to a video game company he started back in Rhode Island. It's probably going back 15 years or so. He got a $75 million grant from the state of Rhode Island to start a video game company with the promise that he was going to create jobs. So he gets the money, starts the company. Starts the company. It tanks. He defaults on the loan from the state. He's unable to repay it, and he leaves the entire staff not just jobless, but also without the ability to repay the loan. And he also was not able to pay relocation bonuses that he promised his employees. And that was settled, I think, out of court, but he's been very defiant about how he did nothing wrong with that too. So Curt Schilling is a terrible person. I don't think that makes him not a Hall of Famer. He probably still could be in the Hall of Fame, but I'm not going to feel bad for him if he doesn't make the Hall of Fame. But the way it's looking right now, he's right around that 75% threshold to make it in, and about a third of the vote or so is known right now. He has one more year of eligibility left too, so there is a decent chance that he gets in. But if he doesn't, I'm not going to cry a single tear for him. So,
what couldn't have said it better. Well said. There were some details I didn't even know about that. The Nazi memorabilia thing was out of left field and obviously very disturbing. So Curt Schilling, you're an awful person, man. But if you get into the Hall of Fame, whatever. So here's what annoys me then, right? I mean, look, I know PEDs are bad and you shouldn't take PEDs and it's technically cheating and all this other stuff. And you know what Curt Schilling did off the field was off the field. But if he is going to get into the Hall of Fame, I mean, we're at the point now where Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, some of these guys should be getting in, right? Please tell me this is the year.
Yeah, you know what? It could be. So Bonds and Clemens, amazingly, there's still, I think, one writer who votes for one and not the other. I think they vote for Bonds and not Clemens. I don't see how you vote for one and not the other, but there's still one of those guys around here. But they're just shy of that 75% mark right now with a third of the vote in. It's been a pretty long grind for them when it comes to the vote. I think they started out in the 25 to 30% range a bunch of years ago. They still have a year of eligibility left. I think they're going to get in probably next year. And there's a lot to be said about the whole steroid thing. You know, we talked about it last year. It's been talked about ad nauseum. I'll add one thing to it, or one point to it, which I think, is in their favor when it comes to their Hall of Fame case. So I was thinking back to the Mitchell report, that came out, I think it was 2007. So it's a while ago now. But there was a lot of hoopla about who was going to be on that report. I think in the end, there was about 100 players that were released in that report. There was only a handful of superstars. There was, Bonds, Clemens, I think Giambi was mentioned, Andy Pettitte was mentioned. A lot has been said about them. But the vast majority of the guys were marginal Major League Baseball players, like some guys who were just fighting to even be in the major, like have a job in the major leagues. So what that says to me is if you use steroids, it's not some magic potion that's going to turn you into a superhuman baseball player. You have to be an all-time great baseball player to make it into the Hall of Fame. And steroids isn't going to do that for you alone. It's not going to take a minor leaguer and make him into even an average major leaguer. It's not going to take an average major leaguer and make him into a superstar. That much is clear from the Mitchell report, at least to me. So the fact that they did steroids, yeah, it's not the greatest thing in the world. I wish they didn't do it, but it's also probably like the 10th or 11th worst thing Major League Baseball players have ever done. So there's far worse characters and people in the Hall of Fame already. They are certainly two of probably the top 5 major leaguers of all time. They belong in the Hall of Fame. We should be talking about them. The story of baseball is not complete if they're not in it. So they should get in. I think next year is the year for them.
Well said, man. And honestly, I'm just so sick of this, especially with Bonds. I mean, this guy, Clemens was great too, but Bonds was an absolute stud, a superstar, and home run record, all that jazz. He made a lot of people a lot of money, and all these years later, he's still shunned. To me, it's kind of appalling.
Yeah. And the steroids didn't help his batting eye. That's an all-time great batting eye, So.
Exactly. So is there anybody on this ballot right now that you feel like is under the radar? We know about guys like Pettitte and Sosa. We just talked about sure. Bonds and Clemens. Anybody that jumps out at you?
Yeah. So I think we're in a unique position this year because there was nobody new on the ballot this year that is crowding the plate, so to speak. So I think we're in a position now where some guys who maybe haven't gotten a whole lot of love are starting to get that love via the vote. So I'll just mention a few guys. So somebody like Todd Helton played for the Colorado Rockies, and I feel like for that reason, a lot of people don't vote for him because I feel like anything he did on the field is because he was playing in Coors Field. To an extent, that's true. Todd Helton's home and road splits, they look a lot better at home than they do on the road, just like any other baseball player, just like any other Colorado Rocky. But his road splits were not bad. He was not a bad hitter on the road by any means. And he was truly a great hitter. If you look at the back half of his career, so he's a home run hitter for the first half of his career, certainly helped by Coors Field. But in the back half of it, his home run totals dipped significantly. For the last, 8 or 10 years of his career, I don't think he hit more than 17 or 18 home runs. Even at that, even without those power numbers, he added significant value with his bat because he had a great batting eye. Maybe not like Barry Bonds, but he had a great batting eye. And he was a smart hitter. He knew what he was doing when he came to the plate, home or road. He was a good hitter. And I think over the past couple of years, he's starting to gain some steam. And I think he's over 50% of the vote now. So he's finally starting to get some of the recognition. It's seeming likely that he's going to get in via the writers' vote, which is good. A couple other guys. So Scott Rowland is another guy who his support, I think, doubled in last year or between 2019 and 2020. He went from like 17% to 35% of the vote. Rolen is an all-time great fielder at any position, but he was a third baseman. And third basemen are significantly underrepresented in the Hall of Fame. There's only 16 third basemen in the Hall of Fame right now. And that's by far the lowest amount of any other position in baseball. So Scott Rolen would be certainly a welcome addition to the third baseman in the Hall of Fame. I think he's got at least 5 years left on his eligibility. It's looking like he's going to get in. And then last but not least, I'll talk about Billy Wagner. So he was a closer. He pitched for the Mets. So, us New York folks are familiar with him. I live in Philadelphia. He pitched for the Phillies for a while. So I've seen him up close in person too. Billy Wagner was an odd baseball case. He was only about 5'10". He was a lefty closer. Both of those things are not what you'd expect from a closer, but he threw over 100 miles an hour, which is also kind of crazy considering how small he was. But let's talk about his contemporaries. So Mariano Rivera and Trevor Hoffman. Billy Wagner was no Mariano Rivera. Nobody is, or probably ever will be. But he was definitely better than Trevor Hoffman, who made it in his second year of eligibility, I think, as a slam dunk. Billy Wagner might not have had as many saves as Hoffman because he wasn't a closer for as long as Hoffman, but he still had over 400 saves. His walks and hits per inning pitched is an all-time mark, I think. He's below 1, which is even better than Mariano Rivera. And, in his time, he was probably the second best closer of his generation behind Rivera. So for that reason, I think he belongs. And closer is a tricky position to kind of assess in the Hall of Fame because it's a relatively recent phenomenon. But he's also starting to gain steam in the vote. I think he's also doubled his support recently with the crowded ballot kind of clearing away some of the slam dunks. So I think he might be able to sneak in by the time his eligibility is up. And one quick note on Andruw Jones, 10-time Gold Glover, really good power hit, over 400 home runs in his career, averaged 34 home runs over a 10-year period. Andruw Jones also belongs in. He's got 5 years left. He's over 40% on the ballot right now. So I think he's got a shot as one of the best center fielders of all time from a fielding perspective. So hopefully we'll see him in the next couple of years too, get his way in there.
Tremendous insight. Yeah, I totally agree on Jones. As for anybody on the ballot that you feel like is overrated, is there somebody that stands out to you that's like, you know what, that they're a little too borderline for me?
Yeah. So, and also there's recent news about this guy that kind of does not tilt the scale in his favor. So Omar Vizquel. Omar Vizquel is, he has the reputation of being an all-time great shortstop, as a fielder, which, he was pretty damn good as a fielder. I wouldn't say he's all-time great. There's certainly a handful, if not 10 to 12 guys who are probably better than him as a fielder at shortstop. I mean, Ozzie Smith blows him out of the water, but he was a good, solid shortstop for a long time. He was gaining a lot of steam in terms of the vote. I think he was over 50% last year, which is interesting because he couldn't hit at all. He was a pretty bad hitter, and I think he only approached average production for maybe a season or two in his very long career. Part of what I think makes him sneak in is that he was part of that great Cleveland team. They had one of the best lineups of all time throughout the 90s, and Vizquel was a part of that. So he could sneak in the 8 or 9 spot, and the offense didn't miss a beat, even though he was hitting 260 with an on base that was approaching 300 with no home runs. But his case is now losing water because of domestic abuse allegations that have come to light recently. Multiple allegations from his wife or girlfriend, I forget which, but it does not paint a very good picture for Vizquel, and the vote is reflecting that now. I think he's lost about 10% of the steam that he gained last year. So I think he was an overrated case to begin with, and it's looking like he's settling back into a spot where he's not going to get elected via the writers. We'll see what happens down the road with veterans committees, but I don't think it looks good for Vizquel, and I think that actually makes sense. So.
And what's not looking good right now at the time we're recording this is the NBA season. They did it so well in the bubble in late 2020, 2021 so far. A lot of games are being postponed. I believe it was the Sixers who had to play Dwight Howard as point guard at one point because they were just quarantining so many guys.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just an absolute mess. And baseball stumbled a bit. To its credit, at the end, it finished strong with the Dodgers winning the World Series. Of course, you had the controversies with COVID there and the celebration, but knock on wood, it seems like everybody was okay and they dodged a major bullet, no pun intended. Now we got 2021. No bubble that we know of. COVID's still running wild. Granted, there is a vaccine now, thank goodness. A lot of vaccines. I'd imagine a lot of these players will certainly get the vaccine when available, but as the NBA has said, I'm sure a lot of sports leagues will follow suit. They're not going to jump in front of the line as far as vulnerable population, everybody else. So with all that being said, with the assumption that at least a majority of the major leaguers and staff can get their hands on some type of vaccine by the spring, how do you see the 2021 season going for baseball?
Yeah, let's start right here in New York, or right there in New York, should I say, for you. I still think they're contenders in their division, and if you win your division or even sneak in the wild card, you got a chance these days. They got Cole. They can board the Cole train in the playoffs. I still think the Red Sox and the Blue Jays, you can really consider them front runners for the AL in general. And then if you look on the West Coast, I think the A's have a really good squad too. I mean, last year they really started to finally gel as a team. I feel like the A's, they're always in perpetual rebuild mode, but they have a pretty good young core of guys who are in their mid to late 20s. Matt Chapman, Matt Olson. They have a pitching staff, which, they have a couple of guys who you can rely on in the playoffs, if once they get a chance in the playoffs, last year notwithstanding. So I think those four teams, the Yankees, Red Sox, just because the Red Sox are always there, much to my dismay. The Blue Jays, who can sneak in there, they always have a good lineup. And the A's, I think those are the teams to watch because you never know what's going to come out of the Central. It's a surprise every year. And then going on the other side of things, staying in New York now with the Mets. What the hell are the Mets doing, man? This is not the Mets that we
Yeah, big trades, new owner. I mean,
yeah.
Glitz and glamour again. The guy that the owner seems to actually have the money.
Right. Yeah. And willing to spend it. It's one thing to have the money. Look at the Yankees. It's another thing to spend it. And, he's making a splash as a new owner, and good for the Mets. I've always thought, when the Mets are making moves and when they're a good team, it's good for baseball. Having some juice in New York when it comes to baseball is good for the sport in general. So I think that's definitely the case now. The Mets, they're doing stuff right now. And I think, the Mets obviously can be a contender this year. The other team in the NL, and I'm not going to say the Dodgers because you think of the last handful of World Series champions or just World Series champions lately, they always seem to have a one-year hangover the next year. I mean, the Cubs kind of fell on their face. The Nationals fell on their face last year. The Red Sox, when they won, they were out of contention pretty quickly thereafter. So I'm not going to go the Dodgers route. I'm going to go the Padres route, who, on the West Coast, they're also making moves. I mean, they're locking up Fernando Tatis Jr. long term, which is a smart thing to do, but they're also making smart trades. They're trying to win now, which is good. This has been a long time since San Diego was a relevant team in the major league landscape. So coming out of the NL, I'm going to look at the Mets and the Padres. I think we might see them as the front runners going into 2021.
That's pretty legit. But I got to ask you though, with all that being said, do you think MLB can successfully pull off a season without any snags? They did it in 2020, 2021. They should be able to, but okay, they had snags in 2020, but they still pulled it off. 2021, they should be able to, but there's still this virus going on. There is still the more contagious version. And of course, lucky us, it's in New York now. So how do you see it playing out? Does the season finish on time? Do you think they postpone? What do you think shakes out?
Yeah, so I think of any of the sports, baseball has the best chance at being unscathed when it comes to this stuff because they play outside for the most part. Even in dome stadiums, you might as well be playing outside. Unlike football, who also plays outside, the guys aren't on top of each other on a regular basis.
Yep.
collisions at home plate are extremely rare even these days, or especially these days, should I say. But yeah, and so I think that point alone gives them a shot. And, they were pretty successful last year with it, as you mentioned, the Dodgers celebration notwithstanding. But then let's also think about maybe a shadier aspect of it. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if a lot of baseball players magically get vaccinated ahead of schedule, depending on their actual demographic. You could debate the ethics on that all you want, but I just wouldn't be terribly surprised if that is the case. So yeah, I think they can make a season happen, especially if the general population is getting more and more vaccinated, and come summertime or even springtime, the warmer weather tends to help things with this virus, as we saw last year. So they got a shot, and let's hope they can do it without too many hiccups.
Absolutely, we sure hope so. It worked out in the end last year. It's not looking great for the NBA right now, but hopefully for all sports, by the end of 2021.
Or college basketball. Yeah, college
goodness.
basketball is in rough shape right now.
Yeah, man, it is wild. Hopefully things will certainly work out in the end. Man, some tremendous insight as always, Jim. But before we let you go, I know you still got some things cooking up on the writing side of things. Of course, you got a book as well, naming the greatest New York Yankees of all time. Do you want to tell us about your book and what you've been working on in 2021?
Yeah, sure. So my book came out not this past summer, but the summer before. It's called The New York Yankees All-Time All-Stars. It's basically a series of brief biographical essays on all of the great Yankees throughout the years. What I did was basically compile an all-star team using the rules of today as far as how they compile all-star teams. So it's a roster of 33 guys, a full pitching staff without any designation between starter reliever, just pick the best pitchers. Lots of a nice deep bench, which is good, like you see in an all-star game, and you kind of need that if you're picking Yankees because there's a lot to pick from. But yeah, it was good it was a really fun experience writing that book because I got to really dig deep on some unsung heroes of the Yankees past. Some guys who aren't in the Hall of Fame. We had a Hall of Fame discussion today. Some guys who aren't in the Hall of Fame but probably deserve to be. The usual suspects in the 70s who kind of flew under the radar because of guys like Reggie Jackson, because of guys like Billy Martin. Those huge personalities. Somebody like Willie Randolph flew under the radar, but he's really an all-time great player, not just Yankee, but player in baseball. So it's really fun celebrating guys like that, Greg Nettles, Roy White, even going back further, guys like Charlie Keller, Tommy Henrich, some great outfielders of the past. So digging in on those guys and kind of seeing how they contributed, how meaningful they were to the team back when they were successful on some of their really great successful runs. You can learn all about that stuff. And on my blog, I have a blog. It's called Jimmy Says. It's jimmysaysblog.blogspot.com. And I just recently posted a couple of things on this year's Hall of Fame class, and I dug in on the former Yankees, even if they just spent even a half a season with the Yankees. I dug in on their case and did a bit of a biography on those guys, so you can check that out. And I'll be writing about the Yankees as we get into preseason mode here. Hopefully they do something besides just a couple of trades for minor leaguers, which is all they've done so far. Hopefully we get some news on DJ LeMahieu. Maybe they can add a pitcher or two.
Some good news.
But I'll be so I'll be digging on that as well. And check it out. So.
Fantastic. And I got to get at least one wild prediction for this coming season. Something that we didn't just talk about, something that we don't expect, something you just feel like it's bubbling up in your mind. Is there anything that you foresee that a lot of people aren't right now?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the Yankees because that's my wheelhouse. But so they have a relatively minor prospect, a guy named Clark Schmidt, who's a pitcher. I think he might have made a couple appearances for the big league team last year because they were sparse on pitchers. But the highest he's gotten in the minor leagues is Double-A so far, but he spent a full college career. So he came late to the game. So he's like 24, 25, something right now. But his repertoire fits right in with the Yankees, what they try to do with their pitchers these days, which is minimize the fastball, go all in on breaking balls. He's a sinker ball, curveball guy. I could see Clark Schmidt being a really key part of their pitching staff, whether it's reliever, whether it's starting pitcher in 2021. And I feel like he could be one of the keys to success, because Lord knows they're not going to sign anybody. They're not going to make a big trade. They got Cole, and I feel like they feel like that's enough, which is unfortunate. So we're going to have to look to the young guys to do it. My bet is on Clark Schmidt. We'll see what he does in 2021.
And gun ahead, do you think that the Yankees go all the way? I mean, they've looked good the last few years. They've gotten close. Are you willing to bet that they make it all the way?
I mean, gun to my head, no. But yeah, I'm gonna hope for the best, but prepare for maybe not the best when it comes to the Yankees, based on recent history. I think things will be looking much better if they do sign LeMahieu and maybe make a move for a pitcher. But yeah, gun to my head, I'm not terribly convinced, especially with the playoff format these days. Even 500 teams can win a World Series with relative ease. So we'll see how it shakes out. And I'm going to hope for the best, but, gun to my head now.
That's fair. We definitely hope the best for the Yankees, for the Mets. And yes, we have our New York bias here, but at the end of the day, when the New York teams are doing well, I think it's good for baseball. I think the same could be said for NBA. Brooklyn Nets just got James Harden. Knicks look like they could be an okay young team. I say okay. I'm lowering the bar a little bit, but you never know. Giants almost made the playoffs. Jets get the second pick, and who knows what they do with it. Getting a new head coach. I think things may finally. I know, poor us, New York. LOL. I think things may finally start to look up for New York sports again for the first time in a few years. Yeah,
as a Knicks fan, I knew that their quote unquote quick start, 5 wins in 8 games, I knew it was an aberration that wasn't going to last. But you know what? If they can be okay, I'll take it. It's been a long time since they've been okay. So yeah, and I'd like to see them, build up their young guys like RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. I'd like to see them rely on them a little bit more than they do right now, instead of relying on somebody like Julius Randle, who's not going to be here next year. But you know what? If they can win 40 games this year, I'm all for it, man. And then, maybe 42 the next year, hit 500. It's been a while.
Hey, baby steps, okay? We
yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, we got some time. Jim, thanks so much, man. Folks, you could check out his book on Amazon, wherever books are sold. Anywhere else?
Yeah, Amazon is the main way to get it. Once things open up, you can find it at Barnes & Noble, too. And also the publisher's website, Lions Press, they also have it available there. So.
Fantastic, Jim. Thanks so much as always.